My name is Jessica, and I'm in my 30s. This is my story. My life turned upside down when my husband Luke's younger brother, Adam, falsely accused me of having an affair with him and carrying his child. To my shock, Luke didn't even hesitate before believing the lie. In an instant, he spat on me, and his family publicly humiliated me. They dragged me through the streets, leaving me with no choice but to leave everything behind and disappear. I drove away, seeking refuge, while my husband and his family thought I was guilty of something I had never done. 2 years later, Luke found me again. He stood in front of me, looking at our child, and his face turned pale. With disbelief in his eyes, he whispered, "Is that?" I didn't speak a word. Instead, I calmly shut the door in his face. That moment marked the end of my relationship with him. I had moved on, built a new life, and found peace far away from the lies and betrayal that shattered my world. After 18 months of trying, I finally saw 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, and my heart skipped a beat. I couldn't believe it at first. It was the moment I had been waiting for, the confirmation that I was going to be a mother. For so long, Luke and I had been struggling with our attempts to conceive, and now, here it was. This was the miracle we had both dreamed of, the chance to build the family we had always talked about. That night, I planned the perfect surprise for Luke. I wanted to tell him in a way that would make him feel as excited as I did. I bought groceries for his favorite meal, lasagna with extra cheese, just the way his mom, Gwen, used to make it. Gwen's lasagna had always been a family favorite, and I thought it would be the perfect way to celebrate this new chapter of our lives. Maybe, just maybe, it would be the thing that would bring us closer again. We had been growing apart in recent months, and I hoped that this joyful news would help bridge the emotional distance that had slowly built between us. As I prepared the meal, I imagined the look on Luke's face when he would hear the news. I could see him smiling, maybe even tearing up with happiness, and then we would talk about our future together. I had this vision of us both getting excited about baby names, nursery designs, and the life that we would build. This baby would be the start of something beautiful, something that would bind us together in a way that we hadn't experienced before. But when I finished cooking and set the table, something felt off. There was an unsettling quietness in the air. I had expected Luke to be home by now. My mind began to race as I set the lasagna on the table, wondering where he was. I tried to push the doubt aside, telling myself that he had just been delayed. Maybe he had a long day at work or something had come up. But the more I waited, the more anxious I became. When I heard the sound of his truck pulling into the driveway, I rushed to the door, eager to share my good news. The pregnancy test, tucked safely in my purse, was ready to be revealed. I could almost hear the words coming out of my mouth. "We're going to be parents, Luke." The excitement bubbled inside me as I approached the door, but when I stepped inside, everything changed. There were too many cars in the street. Luke's truck was parked askew, and through the window I could see silhouettes moving around inside. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. His family, Gwen, Melanie, and Sarah, were in our living room. The tension in the air was thick, and something about the way they moved, the way they looked at me, made me feel like I was walking into a storm. My hands shook as I held the grocery bags, the pregnancy test burning like a secret in my purse. The moment Luke opened the door, I knew something was wrong. His face was expressionless, and his voice was cold when he said, "We need to talk." My heart dropped. I didn't know what was coming, but I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Behind him, his family stood like a tribunal, judging me without saying a word. I followed him inside, the weight of their stares pressing down on me. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that the lie Adam had told would shatter everything. The pregnancy test in my purse was the evidence they had used to condemn me, to make me into someone I wasn't. As they pulled out the DNA test results, my world crumbled. I could hardly breathe as the accusations flew, and Luke's disbelief hit me like a slap. His family had already made their decision. They believed the lie without a second thought. Before I could even speak, Luke's spitting on me felt like the final confirmation that I had lost everything. I had always felt like an outsider in Luke's family, like I could never truly fit in. His mom, Gwen, held a powerful influence over their household. Everything revolved around her decisions, from the Sunday dinners to the subtle ways she made me feel unwelcome. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, Gwen's disapproval always lingered in the background, like a shadow I couldn't escape. And then there were his sisters, Melanie and Sarah. They were always quick to remind me, in their own subtle ways, that I didn't belong in their tight-knit family. The tension between us was palpable, and over time, it wore me down. I began to question whether I would ever truly be accepted by them. But out of all of them, it was Luke's younger brother, Adam, who truly made me uncomfortable. At 26, Adam was still living in his childhood bedroom, a grown man without direction. He bounced between odd jobs, never settling, and it was clear he struggled with substances, his eyes often bloodshot and his mood unpredictable. While the rest of the family seemed to avoid confrontation, Adam's behavior was more direct, and it made me uneasy. There was something about the way he looked at me, something predatory in his gaze that I couldn't shake off. During family gatherings, I could feel his eyes lingering on me longer than was comfortable. It wasn't just the occasional glance, it was as if he was studying me, evaluating me. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was all in my head, that maybe I was just imagining things. But the more I saw him, the more I realized I couldn't ignore the way he made me feel. It wasn't just his looks, it was his entire presence that unsettled me. He would corner me in the kitchen, make inappropriate remarks, and linger a little too long when he spoke to me. At first, I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't want to cause tension within the family, so I kept my distance, but that didn't stop his advances. I had learned to smile through it, to pretend I didn't feel his eyes on me. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Every encounter left me feeling uncomfortable, as if I was walking on eggshells, waiting for the next incident to happen. I wasn't sure if Luke ever noticed, or if he simply chose to overlook it. But I knew that if I ever spoke up, it would make things worse, and I didn't want to jeopardize the fragile relationship I had with Luke. In the back of my mind, I wondered if Adam ever resented me for being with Luke. Maybe he saw me as an obstacle, something standing in the way of the attention he craved from his family. Whatever the reason, it was clear that I was never going to feel safe around him. I learned to be cautious around him, always aware of where he was in the room, trying to avoid being alone with him. And yet, no matter how much I tried to protect myself, the unease never really went away. 3 months ago, at Gwen's birthday celebration, everything that had been simmering beneath the surface finally came to a head. I had been trying to avoid being alone with Adam for months, but that evening, fate caught up with me. The house was filled with people, and the chatter was loud, but I could feel the tension in the air. I found myself cornered in the kitchen, just trying to help with the dishes when Adam appeared at my side. He was drunk, his words slurring together as he leaned in too close. I could smell the alcohol on his breath, and I immediately felt that familiar discomfort rise within me. He made advances on me, and I quickly rejected him, hoping that would be the end of it. But instead of backing off, his demeanor darkened. His eyes, usually cold and distant, now held something far more unsettling: resentment. His words became more forceful, and there was an aggression in his tone that I had never seen before. I brushed off his warning, telling myself it was just the alcohol talking. I wanted to ignore it, to push it aside, but I had no idea how wrong I was. Little did I know, his jealousy and bitterness had been growing for months, and that night it would destroy everything. After that encounter, I tried to go on with my life, but Adam's actions set a terrible chain of events in motion. A week later, I found out I was pregnant. The news should have been a joyous moment, but instead, it was overshadowed by the toxic atmosphere that Adam had already created. I planned to share the news with Luke that evening, hoping that the baby would help bring us closer again, just as I had hoped before. But when I finally told him, his reaction was not what I expected. Instead of joy, there was disbelief. Luke didn't believe me when I told him I was carrying our child. He accused me of lying, of trying to trap him, and worse, he believed Adam's accusations. To my shock, Adam had gone even further. He had faked a DNA test, claiming that I had an affair with him, and that the child I was carrying was his. It was the cruelest betrayal, one that I never could have imagined. The entire family, Gwen, Melanie, and Sarah, all sided with Adam. They didn't ask questions. They didn't try to understand. They simply believed Adam's lies, and with that, they turned on me. I was left standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by people who once called me family, and yet all I felt was betrayal. And then Luke, the man I had loved for years, spat in my face. The shock of it hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't process what was happening. The man I had built my life with, the man I thought I could trust, was standing there, siding with his brother over me. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I didn't know how to react. I couldn't even speak. The humiliation, the confusion, and the heartbreak flooded me, leaving me paralyzed. I never imagined it would come to this, but the family I had tried so hard to belong to had now turned their backs on me, without a second thought. After the humiliation, I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer. The anger and confusion still burned in my chest, but I felt like a stranger in a place that had once been home. Every corner seemed to whisper betrayal, and the thought of facing Luke, or his family, again was unbearable. I packed up what little I could, throwing clothes and essentials into my car, the sound of my movements echoing in the empty house. As I grabbed the last of my things, the phone buzzed with an incoming call from Luke, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. The heartbreak in his voice, the lies, and the accusation, it all felt like too much to bear. I hit ignore and left the phone in the passenger seat, trying to focus on the road ahead. I drove aimlessly through the suburbs, the streets feeling like a blur as I tried to escape the life I had known. With every mile that passed, I felt the weight of the past few days lift slightly, replaced by a heavy emptiness. I was broken, feeling the sting of betrayal from the person I had loved most. The tears came, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I was alone, but somehow the loneliness was better than the suffocating weight of the accusations and the betrayal. I drove for hours, not knowing where I was headed, until finally I made the decision to go to Portland. I needed someone who would understand and not judge me. My best friend, Clara, was the one person I knew I could count on. We had been roommates in college, and through everything, she had always been there for me. She had seen me through my worst days, my best days, and every awkward phase in between. I knew she'd be the one person who would give me the space to heal and start over. When I finally arrived at Clara's apartment, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. She greeted me with open arms, her face full of concern, but without any judgment. Clara didn't need any explanations. She knew me. She knew what I had gone through, and in that moment, all I wanted was to be held, to feel the comfort of a friend who had no preconceived notions, no doubts, just love and understanding. As I broke down in her arms, I knew that this was where I needed to be. Clara offered me the chance to start over, to rebuild my life from the ground up, away from the family that had betrayed me. With her support, I would find a way to move forward and heal, one step at a time. Clara welcomed me with open arms the moment I arrived, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I could finally breathe again. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She simply embraced me, offering comfort and space, and I knew I had made the right decision to come here. With her support, I began the long process of rebuilding my life. I quickly found a remote job, which allowed me to work from the safety of Clara's apartment and focus on the future without worrying about the toxic environment I had left behind. It felt good to have a routine again, one that was my own, free from the chaos of the past. Every day, I focused on small tasks, preparing meals, working, and planning for the baby. Slowly, I started to feel more in control, despite the deep emotional scars that lingered beneath the surface. With Clara by my side, I no longer felt like I was completely lost. She reminded me of my worth, and that was the healing I needed. As my pregnancy progressed, I felt a deep bond growing between me and the child I was carrying. Every little movement, every flutter, made me feel more connected to the life growing inside me. It was a bittersweet feeling, though. On the one hand, I was filled with excitement about becoming a mother. On the other, I couldn't shake the sadness and betrayal from the life I had left behind. But as I looked at my growing belly, I knew this child was my future. It was going to be my journey, and I would raise this baby with all the love and care I had to offer. I made a decision that day, one that gave me a sense of purpose. I would raise this child on my own, far away from the toxicity and betrayal of Luke's family. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their lies. I would be enough for this baby, and together we would create a new life built on love, trust, and understanding. As I walked down this new path, I felt a quiet strength within me that I had never known before. And with Clara by my side, I knew I was not truly alone. We had each other, and that was all I needed. 2 years passed, and my life slowly began to settle into a rhythm I had never known before. Clara and I had created a peaceful home for myself and my child, free from the suffocating weight of Luke's family. The emotional scars of the past were still there, but I was healing. I learned to embrace the quiet, the calm, and the love that came with raising my son on my own. I was becoming the mother I always dreamed of being, one who could shield her child from the turmoil and betrayal that had once consumed her. Then, one day, my peace was shattered. Luke started searching for me. At first, I didn't want to acknowledge the growing tension, the tightness in my chest whenever I saw his name flash on my phone or heard from mutual friends that he was asking about me. I had tried so hard to move on, to build a life without him, but the truth was, a part of me always knew this day would come. His guilt was eating him alive, and I could see it now in the messages and the calls that came flooding in. He realized the truth of what had happened. He understood how badly he had hurt me, how his actions had torn our lives apart. The man I once knew, the man I had loved, was now a stranger trying to mend the damage he had caused. But it was too late. Luke began sending letters and gifts, attempting to make amends for the pain he had inflicted. Each letter was more desperate than the last, filled with apologies and promises of change. He seemed genuinely sorry, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive him. The damage was too deep, and the choice he made to stand by his brother's lie over his wife's truth would forever haunt us both. He had chosen his family, their lies, over me, and I had to live with that. I had already made the decision to move on, to raise my son away from the drama and betrayal, and I couldn't let him back into our lives just because he felt guilty. I kept my distance, firm in my decision to protect my peace, to protect my son. I could no longer allow him or his family to disrupt the life I had built. Clara was my support, the one who reminded me that I had the strength to carry on. Every letter I received from Luke went unread, every gift unacknowledged. It was painful, yes, but it was necessary. I couldn't let the ghosts of the past re-enter my world. My son and I were moving forward, building a future that was free of the lies and manipulation that had once consumed us. I chose to hold on to the life I had created, a life that was real, a life that was mine. And in that, I found my peace. Eventually, Luke found me. I knew it was only a matter of time before he would track me down. The weight of his guilt and the realization of what he had lost must have been consuming him. I wasn't surprised when I got the message. He wanted to talk, to explain, to try and make things right. Part of me wanted to believe that he truly regretted his actions, that he wanted to undo the hurt he had caused. But deep down, I knew better. The man I once loved had made his choice, and that choice had left scars on both of us. We agreed to meet at a neutral location. I chose somewhere public, somewhere I could maintain control, a place where I wouldn't feel cornered or overwhelmed by his presence. When he walked in, the first thing I noticed was the pain in his eyes. He looked older, his face drawn and weary, as though the last 2 years had taken a toll on him. And then, when he saw our son for the first time, his face softened. I could see the regret in his expression, the realization hitting him hard that the child he had never known was right there in front of him. His eyes filled with emotion, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the man I once knew. But I quickly reminded myself of what had happened, the lies, the betrayal, and the decision that had led us here. I watched him, observing the painful realization that he had lost everything. The family he had chosen over me, the trust he had shattered, and the child he would never truly know. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped, in the way his gaze lingered on our son. But the truth was, it was too late. His apologies, his regret, none of it could undo the damage he had done. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. I didn't let him back into my life. The years of betrayal, the public humiliation, and the pain were not something I could simply forget. I had fought hard to rebuild myself, to create a life where I felt safe and whole again, and I wasn't willing to let that go. I set clear boundaries, and I knew they were necessary for both of our sakes. I told him that he could see our son, but only once a year on his birthday, and for no more than 2 hours. I also made it clear that Clara would be present as a neutral party, ensuring that the visit remained civil and respectful. This was the only arrangement I could accept, and I made it known that any further attempts to disrupt our peace would not be tolerated. I couldn't let him back into my world, not after everything that had happened. Our son and I had found our way forward without him, and that was all I could focus on now. Luke's presence, his apologies, and his regret were no longer my concern. What mattered was protecting my son, maintaining our peace, and continuing to build the life we deserved, one that was free of the pain of the past. After everything I had been through, I needed something more. I couldn't simply continue to live in silence, hiding from the past. Instead, I chose to channel my pain into something positive, something that could help not just me, but others who had faced similar battles. I started a support group for women who, like me, had been falsely accused or publicly shamed. We called ourselves Silent Strength, and from that moment on, our focus was clear. We weren't about revenge, and we certainly didn't need to scream or fight. What we did was far more powerful. We walked away from the people who had wronged us and began rebuilding our lives, stronger than before. Our group became a sanctuary for women who needed support, who had been cast aside by their families, their communities, or even the world. Each of us came from different walks of life, but we were united by a common thread, our strength. We shared our stories, but more importantly, we shared our strategies for healing. We taught each other how to protect ourselves legally, financially, and emotionally. These weren't just survival tactics. They were empowerment tools that gave us back control of our lives. We learned how to safeguard our future, how to make sure no one could take from us again. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, I found peace. I had built a life for my son and me that couldn't be torn down by the actions of others. In creating a new path for us, I had taken back what had been stolen, the life I deserved, the respect I had lost, and the strength I had forgotten I had. There was no room in our new life for the toxicity of Luke's family or anyone else who tried to tear us down. Revenge wasn't in the destruction of those who had hurt me. If I had focused on that, I would have remained trapped in the anger and bitterness that had once consumed me. Instead, the revenge was in what I refused to let them take from me. I refused to let them take my peace, my happiness, or my future. I refused to let them dictate who I would become. By choosing to move forward, I had reclaimed everything that mattered. My son, my peace of mind, and the quiet confidence that came with knowing I had the power to rebuild from the ground up. In the end, Silent Strength became a symbol of resilience, not just for me, but for every woman in our group. It was proof that no matter what life throws at you, you can choose to rise above it. You can take what's been broken and rebuild it into something even stronger. As time passed, I realized that the greatest revenge wasn't in hurting those who had hurt me, but in the strength I showed by refusing to let them take anything more from me. Luke and his family may have tried to tear apart my life, but I chose to rise above their cruelty. I refused to let them take my peace, my happiness, or my future. Instead of focusing on the past, I decided to build something beautiful, something stronger. Through the support of Clara and the community of women I found in Silent Strength, I began to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self-worth. The path wasn't easy, and the scars still remained, but with each passing day, I felt stronger. I had learned to protect myself and my son, and I found peace in knowing that no one could ever again take what I had built. My son and I created a future that was free from the hurt and betrayal of the past. The true power lies in choosing to walk away from negativity, to protect what matters most, and to embrace the life you deserve. This journey taught me that even in the face of adversity, we have the power to choose our own path. Silent Strength became a reminder that we can rebuild, that we can rise above, and that the greatest revenge is living a life that's full of love, peace, and purpose. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you found inspiration in my story, please consider subscribing to the channel for more stories of strength and resilience. Together, we can continue to empower each other.